I'd like to share with you the reason that I decided to adopt. When I was young, I decided that if I got married and if I had children, I'd adopt half. I grew up in the 1960s and I could see the chaos the world was in. What got to me most was that there were so many children who needed good homes. I carried this with me through life. Eventually I got married, I had a son, the marriage ended, and I didn't believe in only children. The idea of adoption came to mind again. I was working in an educational office the first day I met my daughter. One day, a social worker with another woman came to the office, the cutest little girl I'd ever seen, to register her for class. It just so happened this little girl was deaf. She was 2.5 years old and had cute little pigtails on either side of her head and such a curiosity about her. She only knew a few signs, basically no language exposure. But you can see by the light in her eyes that she was very aware that she was the subject of our discussion. Well, while we were waiting there, my supervisor, who was also deaf, came out of her office. She greeted the visitors, then walked past me and she signed, find out more information about the little girl, her age, her race, that kind of thing. I agreed and I began questioning the social worker. I found out the little girl was 2.5, free to adopt, and was biracial. Her mom was white. Her father was most likely black and white. I relayed this information to my supervisor, and she said thanks, but no thanks, and walked into her office. Well, it was too late for me. I was already hooked. I remember my first interaction with her. I had a box of chocolate Teddy Grahams on my desk. Her eyes were fixed on them, so I just for her to come on over after getting approval from her foster mother, of course. She got up and walked fearlessly to my desk and put the biggest smile I've ever seen on her little face and held out her hand. Her foster mother prompted her to sign, "Cookie, please," and she did. I lowered the box so she can reach in and get a cookie herself. She grabbed a little handful, then she turned to go back and sit down next to her foster mother, which then prompted her to sign, "Thank you." It was that moment that I decided, okay, I want to adopt. I started by asking the social worker questions like, can a single mom adopt? Do I have to own a house? What kind of expenses are involved? That kind of thing. She patiently answered my questions. Then she looked up at me and she asked, so when do you want to come in and fill in the forms? I shortly replied, next week. I set up an appointment then and there. The following week, I went into the Department of Social Services, and the social worker gave me a folder and asked me to read the profile of the little girl. I noticed behavioral issues right away and told the social worker that that was typical for deaf children due to lack of communication, which leads to frustration. The only tools that they have to express this is behavior. Once the communication issues are addressed, she would see behaviors lesson 2. She asked if I was still interested, and I replied, well, of course. Then I started the paperwork. Now, at this point, I hadn't realized that there was a national search for parents for her. Now I felt, well, I didn't stand a chance because I was a single parent living in an apartment, but after references, background, and everything else were checked, I was approved. I'll never forget the first and actually only home visit we had. First, let me explain the process. Typically, you have 2 supervised visits in the foster home, followed by 2 to 3 unsupervised visits. If all goes well, then an overnight is scheduled, which gradually progresses to moving in as a foster adopt situation. So during the first visit, of course, I was nervous, but little Ashley wasn't. She was the youngest of 5 babies, not including 2 natural children of the foster parents. I sat on the couch watching her boss all those little kids around the room. Then she came towards me, flashed this cute little smile. She sat next to me on the couch and then scooted away from me. She then pulled her legs up on the couch and rested them squarely on my lap. Laid her head down as if to say, this is my home. I love children with attitude, and she had it in spades. I left feeling hopeful. Later that week, I got a phone call from the social worker asking if I were ready for an overnight visit. Surprised, I asked, well, what's going on? She told me that they wanted to expedite the adoption and they felt that we were the perfect home for Ashley. So I said, sure. We set up a day for her to visit and I got our home ready for this cute little girl called Ashley. I brought her home. She was relaxed and looked as if she'd been here all along. She just fit. Later that night, I got another phone call from the social worker asking if I could keep her due to some issues that occurred in the foster home. Now, understand, I had nothing other than clothes in her bag and the car seat. No bed, no furniture, no sheets, no blankets, nothing. I immediately sent an SOS to all my friends who willingly and thankfully, excitedly gave us what we needed. We had a good first night. The next morning, we got up and went about our day. I started acclimating Ashley to her environment, which meant letting her know the expectations and rules of the house. My son doted on her. It was like he didn't want her feet to touch the ground. I finally got him to let her go, and he went outside to play while she played with toys in the living room. Now, in my apartment, the living room and kitchen were divided by a partial wall, so from the living room to the kitchen, it was a perfect view. Now, I gestured to Ashley, and I remember she had no language, so I gestured to her that I was going to make lunch and that she should stay and play. And I was just around the corner. So I went into the kitchen and started getting lunch ready, checking in on Ashley about every 5-10 minutes. When lunch was just about ready, I checked in on her again. She was gone. I checked the bathroom downstairs, then I ran upstairs, checked there. Nothing. I ran outside looking left and right, trying to see any hint of her. I decided to find my son, who was playing in the courtyard near our apartment, just around the corner from our apartment to the right. Well, who do you think was there? It was Ashley, running around trying to get her brother's attention so she can play with him. I was both relieved and livid at the same time. I picked her up, brought her into the house, kicking and screaming and shouting, "No, no, no!" Once we got into the apartment, I put her down and got down on her level and suggested that she needs to stay in. It was dangerous. I thought she was lost, etc. She only screamed more, kicked, and I took her directly to timeout. She wasn't happy at all, but eventually she calmed down. I showed her why she was in timeout and now it's over, so she can play inside. She smiled, and then she took her little fingers and manipulated them into an "I love you." I just wanted to cry. That was when I knew I was her mother and she was my daughter. She's now an adult. She has her challenges, but you would never know she had no language. I strongly encourage families, single adults, and single parents to consider adoption. It's a challenging yet rewarding experience.